Don't listen to everybody that says no for every one of your ideas, because you're going to get 100 no's for every yes you get. So have the passion.
Ariel, Tseitlin, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
Good. It's an interesting time. I feel like everybody's almost adjusted to this new normal, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to call it normal, but it certainly is a new way of experiencing life.
Definitely. I mean, after, what has it been, like 12 weeks already, waking up and just opening the computer and getting ready for the first meeting, not even thinking about which office I have to go to. I mean, that's unfortunately for me already becoming a new norm,
Right.
but we can only be hopeful. Ariel, such an impressive background, and I can't wait to talk to you about scaling and about cybersecurity and your different experiences from an MBA at Wharton to being an executive within Netflix and really overseeing some incredible scale and different challenges there that I'd love to hear about. And now going to be a partner at Scale Venture Partners and sitting on the boards of some incredible companies like Honeycomb and PerimeterX, whom I admire. Ariel, who are you? Give me a little bit of a rundown, and then I have some deep dives that I want to do with you.
Sure. Um, First, I'll give you the geographical history. So originally from Georgia in the former Soviet Union, the country, not the state, which is something I would like to preface or postfix that with. Moved at a young age to Israel, spent about 7 years there growing up as a kid. And then my dad got a job here in the Bay Area and moved here kind of at the end of middle school and lived in the Bay Area ever since. From a career standpoint, really followed my father's footsteps. He was a software engineer back when they weren't called software engineers, and just really taught me kind of the ins and outs of programming, and I enjoyed that from just a very young age.
So
So
when
I
did, when
always
did you start
knew.
programming?
Say again.
When did you start programming?
I started programming back in Israel. Gosh, I think I was. I left Israel when I was 10, and this was a couple of years before I left, so probably 7, 8.
Wow,
My mom signed me up for some
seven
kind
or
of
eight.
a basic programming class for teenagers, but she had some kind of a connection there and was able to get me in early because I was just very interested in it.
I mean,
And
today with Code Monkey and all these different softwares, if you're 7 and 8 and you're not coding yet, you're a little bit out of the game. But in your time, going to program at 7 or 8, that's pretty unheard of.
Yeah, it was wow. It was fun. I got my first Commodore 64, which was the first computer I played around with and had just incredible amount of fun with it. So when I came to the States, I kind of knew what my career path was without thinking about it too much. So I went and got a computer science degree from UC Berkeley and started out as a software engineer. Had an incredible fulfilling time doing it for a number of years, and then kind of got a little bored with the coding side of it, and I was at Siebel Systems at the time, and the company was just growing like crazy. This was back in the late '90s, and got the opportunity to manage a team. So said, hey, why not? This looks interesting, and is a different challenge that I don't understand anything about. So what could possibly go wrong? And so started managing a team, and really went into engineering management from there.
What was it like doing that transition from an engineer to managing a team of engineers? I made that transition early in the IDF, and it was a little bit different from what I expected it to be.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Particularly back then as a first line, and I think these days too as a first line manager. I mean, you're really kind of bridging the gap between being the kind of the expert from a technical side, which is what got you successful and got you the opportunity to become a manager, to learning how to handle the human side of it and the interpersonal side of it and the team and dynamics of it. And so this is, I think, a common thread that goes through my selection process when I think about opportunities and both on the job side as well as the project side is, if I don't feel like I am learning more than I am teaching, then I just get a little bit bored in a particular role that I'm in. So for that, it was like, this is a whole new world. I
Right.
don't understand very much about it. It sounds really interesting. And so I went, I took the Siebel at the time had a bunch of internal classes that I took around situational leadership, and the usual slate,
Yep.
right? That you try to kind of get up to speed on being a first line manager, and I loved all that. And so it was a very different set of muscles that you have to build. You have to know how to talk and understand people rather than code, which is very different. Code is much more predictable, I would say.
Right.
But I enjoyed it, and so that kind of got me started down that path, and and then got promoted fairly quickly into different kind of different bigger teams, and then Siebel got acquired by Oracle back in what was it, 2006, and so that was a time for me to kind of say pause and say, okay, what's next? Oracle, nothing, I don't want to disparage the company in any way, but it was never on my list of, hey, this is a company that I want to go work for.
Right.
It was, a relatively large organization, and that wasn't what really appealed to me. I really liked the small team, kind of the startup entrepreneurial side of things. So decided to stay at Oracle post the acquisition, but go back and kind of fulfill an earlier part of my desire in my career, which was get a bit understanding of the other side of the business. When I did my computer science undergrad at Cal, my plan was to do a double major in business, and as many plans, that one didn't come to complete fruition, but I did a minor.
So you settled for an MBA at Wharton, right?
Say again?
So you settled for an MBA at Wharton?
Yeah, that's right. So I decided to do the MBA at Wharton. It was actually kind of a funny story, because I made the decision. It was one of those things that you think about it for years, but then you make the decision on a dime.
Right.
And so I made the decision, I think within like a couple of weeks of the application due date.
Wow.
And I remember my family and I were going to Tahoe over the holiday break in December, and that was when the applications were due. And so I was busy, writing my entrance essay for why they should take me, as my friends and family were skiing.
Of course.
But anyway, that was so. Wharton was a great experience. Particularly coming from such a heavy tech background, I had a really hard time understanding what the other side of the business did. I always looked at like sales and marketing as overhead. Like, what are those guys doing? We're doing all the hard stuff. We're building everything. They're out there, trying to, have drinks and dinner with customers,
right,
and living life while we're paying their bills while we're also working hard building, right? We being the engineers of the company. So I figured that's probably what there's something there that I wanted to understand better. So Wharton gave me, I think, a great perspective on that. It was a really rewarding experience. I would do it again in a heartbeat if I had the chance. Part of the appeal to me was, again, I just love learning so much that this was just an intensive period of learning where I was spending 20 hours a week probably outside of while working at Oracle and doing classes and meetings and all that.
Amazing.
A tremendous amount of fun. I love that.
Ariel, when did you get excited about scaling? The word scale.
Well, I mean, it was almost, it's funny you say that, because it was never really something I kind of pursued. It was almost like something in the background that had to be done, right? It's almost like good design. It's not really something at least for me, it wasn't something I kind of got passionate about. But, as I went through these different experiences, it was something that I started developing more and more experience in, whether it's starting from small companies and building them into larger teams and companies, or it was the technical side of scaling and starting out with a handful of users that are mostly your friends and family, and then going to thousands and millions of users. Like that was almost something that had to be done. That you kind of think about your success and pre-plan for your success early on, rather than kind of a path that I followed. So I think Netflix was the time when that understanding of scaling and how to build scalable and distributed systems really emerged for me.
Because, I mean, you're leading. Yeah, you're the director of cloud solutions at Netflix, and one of the most heavy consumers of any cloud infrastructure you can imagine. I mean, that must be a crazy experience in terms of scale and in terms of responsibility to understand how to operate at scale, right? I mean, this is unprecedented scale.
Yeah, I mean, in Netflix, I had the luxury of actually working at a place like Netflix. And Netflix, I got to tell you, if you don't already know, is just an incredible company.
Yeah.
The management culture there, and just the kind of people that the company is able to attract is
I
just
we read
incredible.
there, I think
I've
200.
never been in any other organization where I felt the team was. Well, I take that back. There were maybe one other time when we had like a group of 10 people that were like the most the highest, best people in the company who kind of put together for a small project. But outside of that, in any kind of scale, 1,000 engineers, I think was roughly the size of the organization when I was
Wow.
there at Netflix. And working, everyone you go to is just like knows what they're doing, expert, and not just that, but also like a mature individual,
Wow.
not somebody that has to be managed.
We read for one of my classes at Stanford, we read their, I don't know, like 70 or 100-page slide
The
deck about
culture deck,
culture.
yeah.
Their culture deck, unbelievable. That was, I mean, that was just incredible to see. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you a funny, you want stories. I'll tell you a funny story. Before Netflix, I was at a company called Singevity, which was also a pretty cool company. They were doing residential solar, and my team was responsible for technology, which was the first time in the industry that allowed homeowners to get a solar system designed for their roofs without ever having a contractor come out to their homes and measure it. Right, so we used
Wow.
aerial and satellite imagery in order to create three-dimensional models and kind of design, and then have a remote solar team to design it. But that's less relevant. I was on the management team there. I was running the technology part of the business, and the last executive management team meeting that I was in the company was all of us sitting down and reviewing the Netflix culture slides as a management
Wow.
team and saying, this is a great set of culture slides. Aspirationally, what can we pick from these things to incorporate into our organization?
Amazing.
And then a month or two later, I think it was, I was at the company at Netflix. So that was a
Wow.
serendipitous, and it was funny enough, it wasn't even planned. So I didn't actually go and apply there. I connected to somebody at a social gathering who was working there, and he got me kind of introduced.
Wow.
So Netflix, the picture of scaling there was just incredible. And I'd say not just from the technical side, also organizationally, like the way that they were able to scale this freedom and responsibility culture there, which I still to this day kind of quote and love, is one that I haven't seen effective anywhere else.
Right.
And that just empowers individuals to do just amazing things.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, so I want to move on to scale venture partners, because I think the work that you're doing there is really incredible, and your expertise on the industries you're focused on, and I'd love for you to tell me a little bit more. What does it mean? What is scale venture partners, and what is it about cloud infrastructure, cybersecurity, the companies you invest in? Why are you so excited about that? Because you're also coming in
Sure.
from a very management background, and not too many people who go also the management route have that passion for cybersecurity and infrastructure. Yet you seem to have that interesting junction of the both of them.
Yeah, as with most things, some was by design, and some was just kind of the path that ended up being taken. So first I'll give you a blurb about Scale. Scale has been around for a few decades now. I joined thankfully a team that was fully formed and extremely successful. So that was a wonderful organization to join. That was already successful and doing great things. So I joined in 2013, and that was during Fund 4 for the firm, and we're now currently on Fund 6, and we'll at some point be raising Fund 7. The mission of the firm is really to help companies, once they build a product and have some initial market validation, to take those early revenues and scale it and build it into big business, right? So the term scale there refers to scaling organizations, scaling revenues, scaling businesses. So what we don't invest in is typically the seed stage, when it's
Right.
folks coming out of university and they have an idea, or out of industry and they have an idea and they want some capital in order to build that. Like, that's the part of the market that we don't address from a capital standpoint. But once they spend their 6, 12, 18 months, whatever,
Right.
building it, getting some initial design partners, getting some market validation and some early revenues, that's where we get involved. Typically Series A, Series B, Series C's, kind of at different stages in that scaling phase, and help them kind of build those revenues. And a lot of what the firm's resources are oriented around is, how do you avoid some of the common scaling mistakes? when do you hire? When's the right time to hire? And
What are some of the what are some of these biggest mistakes that
well, I was
they're
just going to say
observing?
most often the time the answer is when you think is the time to hire, it means probably it's too late. You should have started 6 months ago, right, or 12 months ago.
I've been hearing that so much.
And
It's so
when do
interesting.
you yeah, and when do you start building some of these processes in place around understanding conversion, around understanding your pipeline generation, and all this is kind of the go-to-market side of the business, which is usually the set of systems that you have to build after you've built the product and you've been successful with getting your product to market. So that's the idea of scale, and and we've had the I guess I'd say part luck, part our own picking to be selected some great companies to be part of the portfolio, and some great successes in the past is something I'm particularly proud of. In
By the
terms
way,
of my
so
own.
when you do join a company and you join their journey as they're about to scale, so let's say they're raising their Series A, they have some paying customers, they've had market validation, and they're ready to scale their product and to grow it. How do you what role do you take in helping them do that? Are you more of sort of as a bystander who's just overlooking and giving them a yay or nay? Are you very active in looking at their plan and talking to their customers and understanding whether they actually have market validation or if they're just under a false assumption? Where do you fit in there?
Yeah, we talk to a lot of customers before we make the investment. So that's typically part of our diligence process, is to understand, is there really a fit there? Is there a product market fit there? And so we do, we'll talk to, a couple dozen different customers, both customers as well as prospects, as well as, folks in our own network who would
Right.
be typical buyers, and to kind of validate that there's a product market fit there. So that typically happens before we make the investment. And so we get to that level of
And by
conviction
the
by
way,
the
is
time
that
that.
easier as you're more concentrated on a specific industry? So if you're concentrated on cloud infrastructure and cybersecurity,
Yeah,
since
absolutely.
because the same players come up quite often, right?
Well, that's one, and then the other is you just have a much better ability to determine the quality of the answers you're getting, right?
Of
So
course.
you can kind of put people in the bucket of these folks understand it because they kind of understand the complexities of the world, and when it comes to infrastructure, and there might be early adopters and early signals, or these folks are just going to do what they read about in the technical
A hundred
press,
percent.
and then that gives you a different type of data point. So I certainly think the having that experience, I think lets you understand where the market is going maybe a few months, a few
Right.
quarters earlier than when it
Right.
would be otherwise obvious. So back to your question around how involved do we get? I mean, the answer is fairly involved, and this is something that I personally find extremely satisfying and rewarding about this role. Is I don't want to be there kind of sitting once a quarter, kind of saying yay or nay, do this or don't do this, and because that's I don't think that's as effective. Um, in the areas where I feel like I can add value, I get fairly involved, and those kind of fall into a couple of different buckets. One is, well, what's the expertise of the firm? That's certainly something that we have a lot of resources and personal experience with, and
Right.
that's around how do you scale revenues and how do you build some of these systems I mentioned. And then the other side is around just the product and the technical side of it, and that's something that I think I bring kind of uniquely from my own background in understanding how to build engineering teams, understanding how to build products, and even some of the technical kind of scaling side of it. One of the first things I did when I started Scale, before I could really add any value on the venture side, because I was completely new to venture when I first joined, is I went around to different portfolio companies and essentially gave them my talk that I used to give at Netflix around, hey, how do you build large scalable distributed systems that are fault tolerant and resilient?
Okay.
And that was something that was very valuable to those engineering teams.
But
Something
also
that I
to you
had.
because you got to experience the portfolio companies potentially at a deeper way than a lot of other partners do, because from my understanding also the part not every partner is involved with every company, and you got to sort of understand the portfolio a little bit better. Ariel, in the last minute that we have, are there specific places that the market is going to that you're especially excited about, that young people coming out of 8200 or Stanford could be thinking of in the realms of cloud infrastructure, cybersecurity? The world has changed dramatically over the past few months. What are some of the key places that you think bright minds should put their effort?
That's a really good question, and I can give you an answer to that question, but my first reaction to that would be, don't listen to anything that a venture capitalist or investor tells you should be the area that you're focusing on. Because honestly, even I come from a fairly technical background, but it's now 7 years since I've been an operator, and my information is it's got a fairly fast decay, right?
Right.
And so whatever I think it is probably things that I've heard from others. And what I would encourage folks to do is understand from their own vantage point, where are gaps in the market, and then build to that, because it's those folks that are in the trenches, that are building it, that are understanding where those challenges lie, that I think are the best positioned. And we kind of figure it out later, after it's been built, and after the customers already tell us that this is something that's really. So that would be my initial answer. And in terms of specific areas, I think the cloud infrastructure side of things is just extremely nascent at this point. We're in the very, very early days of having, we've kind of just released, VMs, right, and as a technology when it comes to fast forward to the equivalent in the infrastructure. So every company that's doing anything in a reasonable scale from an engineering standpoint needs to build its own platform from the ground up, and usually constructed in different pieces. So I'm still waiting to see who will solve this problem, who is going to come up with a way of building cloud native applications where you don't have to custom build to AWS and GCP and Azure, and you don't have to worry about scaling up EC2 instances, and you don't have to worry about setting up security groups and ELBs and so on. So like that piece of it, I think, is still missing. So that's one that I'm always on the lookout for. On the infrastructure side, the other side of it, I think that there's also around various parts in the development life cycle.
Right. I hear that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. As the infrastructure changes, the management and orchestration and kind of workflow piece of it has to change as well. So whether it's in software quality or in deployment, each one of those pieces, every time there's a shift in the underlying infrastructure, the management side of it has to
100%. As a software engineer myself, going through these processes and working on a variety of projects, both professionally and academically, I definitely see that as a huge potential, and a place that I'm personally very excited about. Ariel, before we leave, I have to ask you the hardest question, putting you on the spot one last time. 3 words that you would use to describe yourself, or that any of your partners at Scale Venture Partners would describe you as.
I don't want to answer that question. I hate talking about myself, and certainly is not something I enjoy.
Well, that's definitely, I think, a valuable answer on its own.
Curious, maybe I'll say curious.
I'll take curious. Curious is good enough for all 3, and I appreciate the response, and I think that's also something that is, I think, quite interesting, with people who are really excited about helping others accomplish things, and watching a lot of great people around them succeed, and I truly appreciate it. Ariel, thank you for your time. Toda rabba, and thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, I'll leave your listeners with one last thought, which is, I think everybody who's your peer right now is at an incredible place in life that you don't get to experience very often. The world is your opportunity right now, and so don't listen to everybody that says no for every one of your ideas, because you're going to get 100 no's for every yes you get. So have the passion, have the conviction to do what you believe in, and I think that you'll have an incredible time in your life.
100%. Ariel, toda rabba. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.